Hello, New Zealand. We are back. Lock up your kids because we are talking about politics in New Zealand. And Simon O'Connor, good to have you back.
Oh, it's great to be back. We managed to get to number 2. It's always a good start.
I know, it's double figures and we'll have a special celebration. Look, I'm just glad to see you live because I hear that somebody's been trying to take you out by chopping your fibre cable. So
I think I'm up to the 6th cut of my fibre line in the last 6 months. So, yes, I'm relying on my cell phone tonight. So if I drop out, that's my excuse.
Okay, and just a reminder to everybody that you can comment. We will take your comments through on Facebook. It needs to be the Family First Facebook page and also YouTube. And George Overton is right in there already and says, hi there, g'day, and also Jacob Israel in Whanganui. So hi to both of you. So come on to that spot and make your comments through Facebook, Family First, and YouTube. You can watch on LinkedIn, you can watch on X, you can also watch on Simon and my personal page. Are we on your personal page on Facebook, Simon?
Actually, I don't know because I'm on this system talking to you live right now. That's how genuine, this is how genuine political playback is. I can't even get onto my own Facebook page to look.
Okay, well, let's get straight into it because we've got a packed show and restricted time. So straight into it. And the first topic is talking about this issue about police. And apparently there is a special unit which has been set up compulsory called a public safety team. And it's all about hate crime, hate speech and hate incidents, even though there is no hate speech law in New Zealand. And the concerning part is that some of the things that could possibly, well, you can see it in that image there. Now, you sent me that image. Is that from the training pack or is that somebody's interpretation?
No, that's from the actual training pack that police are using to train all police officers that was leaked to the Free Speech Union and then has gone, if you will, public from there.
Okay, but there's a sign there that says there are only 2 genders. You're telling me that police are being trained to treat that as hate speech?
Well, it's been suggested to them, isn't it? That's one of the resources. And you can see below it says there's the recognise, record functions, and there are some suggestions of what could be, including, ironically, Bob, the free speech sign as well. So even talking about free speech could be construed as hate speech or believing in biological reality.
What?
So it's pretty bad. Beyond bad, actually. It's outrageous.
Okay, and I did see some commentary that suggested that the National Party's sign when Don Brash was leader of the party that said Kiwi, not iwi, that would also qualify as hate speech now. Is that right?
Yeah, that's been another one of the suggestions. So this is just one image that's been leaked. A number of police officers are speaking out anonymously about what's happening. Look, really importantly for listeners and viewers to understand, some of this, if you will, comes out of the Royal Commission into the mosque shootings. And sadly, it turns out, the current government's approved most, but not all, recommendations. And one of them, and I don't have it in front of me, is around more monitoring of hate speech. Sadly, on top of that, police have decided to run with the ball even further and set up this training unit so that all police officers can be detecting hate speech. But the fundamental point, Bob, for everyone to understand is only Parliament makes laws. There is no hate speech law. So what are police policing? In other words, it's constitutionally outrageous. They've just created, if you will, their own approach, and now they're going around recording and noting New Zealanders who are supposedly, stress that word, supposedly saying hateful things. And here's a hint. If you're not woke, progressive, or a Marxist, you're probably spouting hate speech, according to the likes of police commanders.
Okay, but this is a bit concerning, and I'm interested to know just from your 12 years experience, so I'm always coming to you as the expert, but of course you know what an expert is, don't you?
Thank you.
X is a has-been and a spurt is a drip under pressure. But as an expert, how much can the Minister of Police tell the police what to do?
Look, they can actually step in here and say, stop it, basically. I mean, there is a little bit with police. There is a convention, a principle that the minister of the day does not get involved in operational matters. So to quickly illustrate that, it would be very inappropriate for the Minister of Police to call up Commissioner Costa or any police officer and talk to them about someone who's had their house burgled or been pulled over for a DUI or something. But at a policy level, which this is, it absolutely should be, well, I'd expect the Minister of Police, the Minister of Justice, the Attorney General, actually, they should be calling police right now and saying, this is not the law of New Zealand. You are not to be pursuing this in any way, shape or form.
Okay, Rosie rightly says, how can you break a law that doesn't actually exist?
Oh, I keep coming back to that word outrageous. At the end of the day, Parliament alone passes law. So when you ever hear the phrase, Parliament is sovereign, that means that only the Parliament singly can make laws. And that's what police implement. They police the laws. They don't make them up, which they are at the moment. And again, New Zealanders are most likely having their names recorded into this database of supposedly saying hateful things. And again, it's not you and I, Bob, or any members actually of Family First, I bet, who are reporting people. It's your left, far left, woke, green voting, all of that group. They're the ones who will be reporting people to police to saying, they hurt my feelings. It's outrageous to use that word again.
Yeah, well, we might come back to that one actually. Okay, let's keep moving it on. And I mean, Rebecca says, how will it be prosecuted with no laws? Maybe they're working on it. I mean, there has been discussion around hate speech. I think if Labor had got back in, we would be seeing hate speech laws. Is it Goldsmith? Sorry, I've forgotten his first name. Has kicked it to touch, the Minister of Justice. Paul Goldsmith, sorry. He's kicked the whole hate speech thing and the Law Commission looking into it to touch, but could be back if the government was to change, wouldn't it?
Well, a couple of really quick things there, Bob, because I know you want to move on. So the first point is you can't be prosecuted because there is no law, but this still has a chilling effect. If a police officer pulls you aside and says, I'm sorry, Mr. McCroskey, we had a report that you were saying hateful things, it has a chilling effect. And the second point is, even though Minister Goldsmith has told the Law Commission stop their work on hate speech, they and other entities are still pushing and trying to find ways. And so the Law Commission, as you know better than I do, to turn to expertise, is opening a inquiry, is it, or a review into gender discrimination, which again is just hate speech in drag, almost literally.
Yes, interesting choice of words there. All right, let's move on to the next topic, and it's really about the toxic nature in Parliament. Of course, we were down there yesterday, and we'll come back to that, but we saw that pretty disturbing incident from Karen Chaw where she was getting a hard time. Let me just remind everybody about that.
I can't control what the public is saying about my personal traits around being Māori enough or not being the right kind of traumatised person. Hearing it from other MPs, that shouldn't be allowed. I'm still a person. And I feel like I'm getting that stripped away from me day by day in this place. I've had enough. I asked for an apology. That's all I wanted, and I didn't get one. And that is...
Yeah, it's pretty disturbing. I was amazed by the Sunday Star Times response last Sunday. Andrea Vance said, act the party of crybabies. I was thinking, golly, if it was Jacinda who had been crying in front of the camera and there was an article that said Jacinda crybaby, there would have been hell to pay, to be honest. So it seems like there's a different yardstick, isn't there?
Oh, 100%. And sadly, but not unpredictably, Vance has just shown her political prejudices loud and clear once again. Actually, I want to stress that for viewers once again. Highly compromised, unfortunately, as a reporter. And this was just a shocking headline. Has hints, of course, of what Elizabeth Kerekere, the now former Green MP, called Chloe Swarbrick, pretty intolerant, and if not bordering on abusive, of Karen Chaw. I mean, at the end of the day, you're right, Bob. Had this been any politician on the left, there would have been days and days of coverage. Instead, here you've got effectively abuse of someone being abused, which is Karen Chaw.
Yeah.
The other thing to note, if you read, as you have, into the article, basically, because Karen doesn't hold the same Marxist views around race, the economy, and if you will, the wider cultural issues, then it's okay to mock her. And so you wonder why we see violence in language and physical violence, both here and overseas, against people who hold different views from the likes of Andrea.
Okay, well, speaking of that, I mean, I just show this clip from Te Pāti Māori because they got stuck into Karen Chaw, who is Māori as well, and this was the response that Debbie Rawira Packer, is it? The white fragility, well, it's the Māori fragility is real. And look at that face, you know, the kind of the smug face, sort of mocking Karen Chaw. So that's coming, once again, imagine if that was someone doing it to Jacinda, or do you remember Helen Clark crying up at the marae at Waitangi one time? Imagine someone doing a TikTok sort of pretending, rolling your eyes and talking about Helen Clark's white fragility. There would be hell to pay in the media. But then the same MP got up in the House yesterday and said this.
How is this government letting a small party like ACT be the tail that wags the dog? How has ACT groomed the Prime Minister and indeed National into deliberately exercising ethnocide? And let me explain what ethnocide is. It is the deliberate systemic destruction of our culture and us as tangata whenua, using legislative power, political force and influence to make us into one. They're one and our none. We'll all be one New Zealanders, one people. Where have we heard that before? This government has lost control. It is very clear, whānau mā, that National is being run by ACT and they're allowing them to destroy our culture, one repeal, one legislation, one punch at a time, very hard and very low. And it's deeply, deeply dark. This government has been led by a dark triad, and let me explain what that means. 3 personality traits, the Machiavellian, the psychopath, and the narcissist. And I'll get you to guess which one's which. The manipulative. Okay,
that's enough of that. But that's very volatile. In fact, I read an article from Barry Soper, I used to interview him every week when I was on breakfast show on Rima, and he was our political correspondent. He's been around for 40 years. He sat in the debating chamber and he said, never has he seen such a provocative and for many insulting speech. This current crop in the Māori Party are clearly on a mission to stir up discontent rather than showing any attempt to be constructive. Simon, you were in Parliament for 3 years while the new crop of the Māori Party were there. Did you see that?
Oh, absolutely. They are radicals. They are dangerous because they are blind to their own prejudices. It's what psychologists would refer to as projection. So just about everything that Debbie Ngāriua Packers and the rest of the Te Pāti Maori radicals say are actually speaking about themselves. So the word she uses to describe the supposed government, from narcissist and so forth, that's them. The TikTok you showed of her abusing effectively Karen Chaw, that mocking, again, is projection. So the other element too, and I don't say this lightly, they fit the classic abuser profile, which is, again, they're very, very happy to be quite aggressive, threatening to other people, but the moment they get any pushback, they quickly switch into a victim mode. And so you see that with the 2 images you've just, or rather videos. Again, mocking, nasty, abusive video about another MP, and the next moment giving a whining speech in the House about how they're all being wiped out, which of course is completely counterfactual to the fact she's just there earning a lot of taxpayers' money. Not good.
Okay, let's check in on some of our comments. June says, oh, please make it stop. Matt says on hate speech, policing hate speech would be hating on mice.
I hope she was talking about our videos, not political playback overall.
Actually, I was just wanting to say, you sound really good, Simon, and I notice you've got a new mic. It's, I think your voice has dropped about an octave.
Well, thank you. I'm channeling Barry White.
Yeah. Either that or you've gone through puberty. Right, Matt says policing. Policing hate speech would be hating on my speech, making itself hate speech, which is true. Sue says woman on woman bullying is the worst. The verbal stuff. Maybe get them in the boxing ring. Peter Parr says mainstream media and spin. Steve says, is this related to Ardern and the Christchurch call? Well, it is connected in a deep way.
It is. The Christchurch call sort of runs parallel to the Royal Commission's inquiry. That's sort of near defunct now, but it is running in parallel, which is very much trying to control what you and I say, think and believe.
Yeah. And just lastly, Jacob says this hate speech nonsense is hurting my feelings. Right, let's go on to our next topic, and it's maths. What were you like at maths at school, Simon?
Actually, up until early high school, I was absolutely terrible, but something happened in the synapses of the brain, and I ended up actually pretty good. Although I decided to leave it at fifth form because I was bored of it. Thought I was done with it, and then I went to university doing geography amongst other things and realised I had to go and learn statistics all over again.
Yeah. No, it was one of my favourite.
What about you, Bob? We're not. What about you? Going to put you
I
on
just
the
like
mat.
the logic of it because I found English very subjective, and I'm a black and white type of guy. So the accounting, maths, that was all my favourite stuff. Anyway, that's enough of my failure at school. Now, speaking of maths, so there's a new curriculum, and it's because basically about 80% of students at year 8 are not up to grade in maths, even higher in year 6, 80% in year 3, and apparently reading as well. And so Chris Luxon says things have got to change.
Whether you're a teacher, a parent, or a principal, or you're a kid still working out what your future will hold, I want you to know we have your back. I have your back. The country has your back. So let's go get education back on track. Thank you very much, everybody.
Oh, there we are. It's hard to believe he's a government. It's almost like he's campaigning. But there was a really, just before I get your comment, Simon, there was a really interesting comment he made on News Talk ZB, which I'm surprised the media haven't picked up. He was talking to Mike Hosking and he made this comment.
Well, I mean, they can criticise us as much as they want. I mean, we're worried about parents and we're worried about kids. And so, no disrespect, but when 4 out of 5 of our kids are not ready to go to do maths at high school, that is a major, major problem. When 3 out of 5 of them are actually more than a year behind where they should be, major, major problem. So we are moving heaven and earth to make sure we pull that curriculum forward a year. We've now got the Teaching Council good on them. They've responded to that same data and said, we've got to actually put an entry-level requirement that teachers coming into the system can have what are called Form 6 or Level 2 maths, which would be good because they haven't felt confident to teach maths to our kids. We're putting more money into professional development for the existing teachers. We're doing 2-yearly assessments. We've got Aero now focused on achievement and earlier interventions around schools not achieving academically. So, look, there's only 2 things we've got to do with our kids at the moment in education, and we might, we're sacrificing and we're going to push back the nice to do stuff.
Okay, now everything he says is fine, but just at the end there, you would have said we're pushing back the nice to do stuff, which is stuff like arts and music. Now, I would have expected a massive furor about that, but he seemed to get away with it. And were people just not listening?
Until now, Bob McCoskey on Political Playback has got him.
I mean, the heading of the article refers to it, but there was just, very, very little outcry. But it's got to be a good thing. I mean, we've both got family who are involved in the teaching profession. Therefore, maths and reading actually is probably more important than gender and sexuality. So it's probably a good thing.
Yeah, what they're announcing around the math curriculum had been signalled during the political campaign. So important for people to understand what they've done is brought that forward. And it's introducing what they call structured or a richer mathematics. So put it really, really simply, at the moment, we unfortunately have very few teachers who understand math sufficiently to teach it. And secondly, they don't have a very rich or deep curriculum. Just gives a very broad outline of what a child is to achieve. There aren't the textbooks, there aren't that structured or deep set of resources. Every teacher is expected to make it up. And as I say, if you don't understand maths, I shouldn't use the American. If you don't understand maths, then it becomes very, very difficult. So what they're looking to is Australia and Singapore, which Again, deep, rich, structured. Here are the steps, here are the textbooks to help. But Luxon is 100% wrong when it comes to things like arts and music. Partly, if I might, because actually music is mathematical and art too, if you will, has that logical, believe it or not, quality to it. I think there's a lot of other things in schools that you could try to drop if you had to, that actually wastes a lot of kids' time. But the idea that somehow arts, music is not important, I think he's wrong. He's very much wrong there.
Really? I was hopeless at art, but I was good at music, so I bet you were the opposite.
Yeah, well, I suppose I would argue it's part of a well-rounded education. I really, look, I used to not fight literally, but when there was changes to the universities years ago when I was in Parliament, trying to reduce it to just complete outputs, it was very utilitarian. You know, if you're going to go to uni, you must come out with something very practical. That's not well-rounded education. That applies to schools as well. Actually, we want our kids to be able to try art and music and maths and reading. As I say, there's a whole pile of other things now which takes away hours a week for the kids, which have very little educative value, which we could drop. So again, good on maths, but let's not ditch art and music.
Okay, and just in fairness, you were part of the government for 6 years of your time, and you were part of the opposition for 6 years of your time. When did the slide begin, and why didn't anybody notice it?
Oh, the slide's been happening across multiple governments. I think actually, has it? Sorry, you've caught me in so far as the question why they didn't notice it. I suspect they did. So I wasn't in the education field. I suspect it's sometimes easier, and it's probably a wider problem in New Zealand politics, that we don't do much visionary or long-sighted. It's just managing what is. So I suspect, education minister after education minister just tried to tweak around the edges, hoping it would get better. The other element too, and you've seen it with the response over the weekend's announcements, the unions kick up a bit of a fuss very quickly too, and they're quite a powerful, I would argue, handbrake on a lot of elements of education.
Oh, for sure. Okay, let's check some comments. And Trudy says reverse racism, and they accuse everyone else of being racist. That's in respect of Te Pāti Māori. Hex Token says new hate speech laws would basically be leftists putting their worldview into law, as you said, Simon. Jenny says, also, could that be transference? This is with Debbie, I think. The person says that the person they are referring to has the problem they actually have. That's called projection. Narcissists do this also. Kevin Sorensen says Māori Party are just totally disrespectful. It seems like that. I mean, in some ways, Simon, they almost make the Green Party look like saints, which is saying a lot. And although they're probably dealing with everything else going on, been very quiet. And Peter says New Zealand First and Act will probably go up in the polls and swap places with National in the pecking order. No, I don't think they will, but possibly there will be a drop in Te Pāti Māori. But often, actually, I saw one poll and it was actually showing that the Māori Party had increased. So maybe it's, feeding to that base.
Look, it is feeding into the base. They are picking up a certain degree of discontent within some in Māori, but let's never forget that the Māori Party does not represent Māori. Most Māori vote elsewhere. But, the fundamental point is, and come back to someone's earlier question, the Māori Party often are trying to talk about respect for their culture, as they perceive it, by the way. But they don't show any respect to anyone else's culture. They don't respect the culture of Parliament, and they don't respect the culture of other Māori when it doesn't suit. Again, Karen Chaw is Māori and is one of the most abused people by the Māori Party. So they just don't walk the talk. So let's hope some of their voters see the light. Okay, well, hopefully. Actually, I had that one. Oh no, I've been through all these. There we go. Cancel that. Okay, let's move on to the next topic. And last week we went down to Parliament, and there we are, standing in front of Parliament with Ala Pomalele, our researcher, and Sue Reid, who's a board member. And just to remind herself that she was a woman, she even wore the dictionary definition of woman, which sort of triggered quite a few people around Parliament.
And then we presented the petition to Winston Peters, their Deputy Prime Minister, which is pretty good to present a petition to the Deputy Prime Minister. And far left is Tanya Unkovic, who is also championing this cause. Just before I get your comment, there was an interesting comment in Parliament later that day. So the media didn't come and see us, did they, Simon? I think there was one media there, but I don't think he wrote a report. So I did check. So basically, no media. I think they were scared that we were going to actually ask them what is a woman, and they didn't want to be caught out, so they stayed clear. But in Parliament, Chris Hipkins got stuck into Winston Peters for entering this debate about XY getting into the boxing ring with an XX. And just have a listen.
Followed that with a question on whether this tweet from Winston Peters entering the gender debate over boxing at the Olympics was appropriate.
Is his Minister of Foreign Affairs providing a running commentary on the gender of international athletes consistent with the standard of behaviour that he expects of his ministers?
It's about fairness in sport. It's not about being opposed to anyone. It's simply about fairness.
Winston Peters seems to have a particular fascination with other people's genitalia.
I find that so rich. I mean, that is projection at its very best. It's also cognitive dissonance, because he is obsessed with wanting 7-year-olds and 8-year-olds to be taught about their sexuality and gender identity, and wants drag queens strutting their stuff in front of kids. So, I mean, the whole thing is just ironic. I would just say, before you comment, Simon, credit to Winston Peters, who's willing to take this debate on, especially given his senior role in the coalition. What's your thoughts?
Pretty much echoing everything you've said. Again, if there's actually a bit of a theme today, without us having planned it, it's what the other side, in this case the left, are saying, so be it Te Pāti Māori or the most recent issue that you've highlighted around, let's say, gender and the culture wars. What Labour is saying of others is actually true of themselves. They are completely obsessed with this issue. If you pick up the papers, they are talking about it to an extent, but actually, I hate this term, but I'll use it because it's accurate, but quite fake news. The way that they are presenting the issue is completely wrong, which is a shocker. Secondly, as you noted with that petition, so the petition, for those viewing, it's about 23,000 plus New Zealanders who signed a petition to say, actually, we can define what a woman is, and calling on for that to be legislatively confirmed, because you're going to end up with the absurd situations that we are seeing in the Olympics right now. But yeah, it's just very sad to see. Very sad to see. And, when you think about it very quickly, the leader of the opposition isn't holding the government to account on inflation, the state of the economy, our debt, our lack of defence spending. No, he's battling the culture wars while then arguing that he doesn't want to talk about the culture wars. I mean, give me a break.
Yeah. Okay. Now, I thought getting 23,500 signatures was miraculous because of the fact that we tried to put a full-page ad in 4 major daily newspapers who are all broke and desperate for money, and they had a little discussion unofficially that we have got evidence of, where they said, no, we don't want to put this ad in that says what is a woman. So they actually conspired together. This is the independent media that we need all the different ones. But there was, now where is it? There was an advert in the paper yesterday, this one, and that was on the front page. And boy, has it triggered the left, because it's about the foreshore and seabed, about how all New Zealanders own it. How did now it's Hobsons Pledge, isn't it? How did they get it on the front page of the paper? I mean, it's a massive expense to get on the front page. The last group I saw do it was the Drug Foundation and the cannabis referendum. Government funding always helps, and of course it backfired on them because everybody was so offended by it. But how did Hobsons Pledge get around the editors when we couldn't? We just asked about what is a woman. This ad, of course, they're arguing is racist.
I just don't have the answer for that. Look, I just think it shows the broken state of a lot of mainstream media. So as you say, you've sought to put in an ad asking, what is a woman? You're stopped. She saw some other commentary that, of all things, the Child Poverty Action Group had to nearly strip a lot of the substance out of one of their ads to even get it in. So they were complaining. And then you get this one. And I think really importantly for people to understand, we're not discussing whether the ad on the paper is right or not. People have different views, but it just seems incredibly arbitrary. You can't help but think, Bob, it comes down to money. We know that all of these media companies are hemorrhaging cash. So maybe it was just as simple as that. They went, you know what, we'll take the hit from some readers, but we'll take I wouldn't even know how much you pay for a front page exposure like that, but it's a lot of cash.
Well, the thing is that our one was simply about being a woman, which seems a lot less controversial than the foreshore and seabed. I mean, I found it amazing. Yeah, they wanted to take the cash, but they could have had our cash. In the end, they saved us a truckload of money. And I guess, 23,500 signatures will still get it in front. Well, actually, I want to ask you this question, Simon. So we've presented the petition. Now, I have been through this process, but I'll get you to explain it so that it's correct from your experience, is that the petition has been presented. We've signed it off. What happens now?
So the clerks of Parliament, so they're like the officials, will quickly go through it. Not going to verify absolutely all and every name. There's 23,500 of them, but they're just going to make sure that it's most of the names are correct, that they're New Zealanders. So they'll just be checking that against the roll. They'll check that the word in the petition makes sense. So that'll be all easy because you've done this before. It'll then go to what's called the Petitions Committee. It's like a gatekeeping select committee that decides whether petitions go forward to other committees or not. So for simplicity's sake, if the petition was about education, it would go to the Education Committee. If it was Foreign Affairs, the Foreign Affairs Committee. So they'll look at the veracity, for want of a better word, of whether or not this is something that should go forward or not. How they decide, my experience is they're relatively arbitrary on that as well. But if it does go forward, then a select committee will have to consider it, which means you'll be asked to come in and talk about it. The public will be asked for their views, and then the MPs will write a report to the Parliament to say, well, this is what we've heard and this is what we think.
Okay, and I know that there's not a logic select committee, so I'm assuming that because it's based on biology, that it's going to go to the health committee?
It should go to the health committee, but my sense, seeing you've asked me, is they'll try to stop this. There seems to be an inability of our political class to actually engage into these, if you will, cultural issues. They're happy to attack them if you are questioning this new dogma around gender, for example, or race, or any of the general, neo-Marxist concepts. But when you're actually saying, could we have a discussion about it, they try to shut it down. So there's actually a chance that this petitions committee will shut things down and just say, no, we're not letting this proceed. But it should most logically go to the health committee or potentially the justice committee too.
Okay, and can that be appealed if they just said, oh, this is a dumb petition and we don't want to talk about it because we don't like it?
Sadly, no. So I mentioned earlier that Parliament is sovereign. So what Parliament decides, that's it. So if, sadly, and we don't know yet, if the Petitions Committee, for example, said, no, we're not going to proceed, then you just got to start again, unfortunately. So it's quite a powerful committee.
Yeah, okay. Okay, let's move on to the next topic, and it is the End of Life Review Committee. Can you just give us a bit of background to this?
So you remember 3 years ago, New Zealand legalised assisted suicide and euthanasia to allow people to end their lives. To get the law through, the proponents of it, which was primarily the ACT Party, compromised in a lot of ways, which was to somewhat limit the law. So you had to have a terminal illness with less than 6 months to live. Well, now we're coming up to the 3-year review, and the push is on to expand euthanasia in this country. So we know the ACT Party, amongst others, want to see it not being 6 months. They want it to be longer, a variety of other decisions. They don't want doctors to have conscience rights. In other words, if you object to euthanasia as a medical or health professional, you shouldn't be allowed. So they've started a review, and they've got a series of questions which they're asking the public. So you can go onto the Ministry of Health website or Google Ministry of Health Euthanasia Review, and you'll be taken to a page where you in the public can submit your views. But really importantly, Bob, people have to understand that firstly, they really do need to go on to the site and submit. It makes a difference. But the way they've structured this review, sadly, is in two parts. There's a public review, which will end up in a nice piece of, not a piece of paper, but a little booklet of, this is what we heard. But the government's also doing its own review via the Ministry of Health. The Ministry of Health is reviewing itself to ultimately, I'd suggest, say that it's a great system. We're knocking people off happily, and of course we should let more do so. So there's two parallel systems at place. It's highly political, as you'd expect, because I think, sadly, the minister in charge of this is David Seymour. He's got his agenda. But I really do encourage people, and then I'll stop talking, I really encourage people to go online and submit. And if you don't know how to, then just email us at Family First and we can direct you to how to find the website. In fact, we might put the link in afterwards too.
Yeah, okay, and actually, good point. We are actually just working on a bit of a guidance as to how people tackle the questions, what to expect as they work through it so they don't get caught out. So we're hoping to publish that shortly. Just can you remind me of the due date again? What is it? 7th of... No. What's the due date for the submissions?
I think it's in September. I don't have it. It's in September. We've still got a good few weeks ahead of us. Okay. But Bob's right. There are questions which they can throw you if it's the first time you've seen them. So we're not here to tell you what to say, but we're just going to give you a bit of an insight into what's been said and then obviously provide you the evidence that proponents of the law and the media won't tell you.
Okay, we're making great time. Let's just move on to the next topic. G'day, mate, especially for our Aussies. And it was based on this, what I would call a hit piece story by One News.
US public holiday is for celebrating the Māori New Year. But our Culture Minister believed there was too much te reo in official invitations. Kia ora, Minister. Hi. Hey, why did you ask officials to take Aotearoa and Māori greetings out of these Matariki invites?
Well, as I recall, it was in relation to sending an invitation to an Australian minister. I didn't think he needed a lot of te reo in his invitation because he's an Australian.
Yeah, I mean, of all time...
the scandal of the century, I would have thought.
Yeah, but of all times to use Māori, wouldn't it be an invite to Māori New Year, to Matariki?
Oh, yeah, but I was just sending it... when I send an email or an invitation to an Australian minister, I just didn't think it needed a lot of te reo in it, that was all.
Email chains released to One News show the invitation officials initially proposed went from tēnā koe to dear, and Aotearoa New Zealand to simply New Zealand. The sign-off replaced with yours sincerely. An official noting the minister wanted all te reo Māori salutations and references made to Aotearoa New Zealand removed.
I mean, you look at our coalition agreement. It says unless there's been a referendum changing the name of our country, the name is New Zealand.
It's an insult, not just to Māori people, but to this country. Here we are trying to celebrate this language, and you've got a minister acting contrary to that.
Others.
Okay, sounds like a bit of a hit piece. It came up again in Parliament yesterday, and there was just a couple of good responses.
What I'd say to you in my dealings with Australians, it's always pays to be incredibly simple and clear and use English. We value te reo. We should be comfortable in this country speaking te reo and English. In this case, he was addressing a letter to a foreign minister.
His coalition partner's bowling in for backup.
I often had to speak very, very slowly for my Aussie cousins.
All communication is about understanding. And this idea that you write to somebody who doesn't understand what you're talking about just doesn't make sense.
What is the...
Okay, you were actually, were you part of Foreign Affairs Select Committee or involved with it, or that was...
I chaired the Foreign Affairs Committee for a number of years.
Oh, can you remember getting letters from foreign delegations which were, there were greetings in the Indigenous language, or...
Well, no is the short answer. I mean, look, it's just such a beat up. Really, I mean, you tell that, what are we up to, 4.6% unemployment now? You go and tell that to the unemployed people, that the biggest issue of the Parliament is a minister writing in English to another English-speaking country. I mean, it's just absurd. Look, the best illustration I can give you of this bizarre tokenistic obsession was actually being at an overseas conference with parliamentarians from around the world, and the lead New Zealand politician chose to spend the 5 minutes effectively speaking in Te Reo. Now look, wonderful language, learnt it myself at university, great to use. But I can tell you those 1,700 MPs and senators from around the world had absolutely no idea. And, to put not too fine a point on it, Bob, there's just this absolute arrogance from the Willie Jacksons and others if they think that the whole world, be it Australians or others, should somehow be trying to work what this is out. Actually, when you want to speak Māori, speak Māori completely. You want to speak English, speak English completely. Simple as that.
Okay, we're just about out of time. Just a quick one. Firstly, it always happens. The worst job in the world is the leader of the opposition, and people are already starting to say, well, is it time for Hipkins to go? And it happened on Q&A. I'll just show you this clip, and then I want you to ask, is he telling the truth, the person who answers the question?
In the room, you are much talked about as the next Labour leader. If Chris Hipkins was to stand down today, would you put your hat in the ring?
Well, first of all, I don't think he will. I think he's doing a good job. And I'll give you one brief example before I answer your question. Every single election under MMP, when a party's been voted out, they've shat the bed. They've argued amongst themselves, they've fought, they've leaked, they've done all that sort of stuff. We haven't done that, and that's entirely down to Chippy's leadership. So I expect him to be leader at the next election. If that didn't happen, I wouldn't be putting my hand up. I'm not interested.
You say?
You believe him?
Not at all. Not at all. He's playing the classic. It's the classic game. I mean, the question only gets asked because somewhere along the line, you're one of his team have put it forward. I mean, this is the classic game plan. So it's ironic to say the least. So no, the very fact that it's being talked about and being denied by the people who are wanting to be leader tells you their positioning. So National's gone through this. Look back on any of the footage if you want for all the leadership contenders. Oh, no, I don't want it. But thanks for asking and stirring the pot. Yep. And wait for when the inevitable happens, and I think it will. And that's no disrespect to Chris Hipkins. It's just once you've been Prime Minister and you've lost and everything you said, worst job. Long and short, Kieran McNulty there, who said, I don't want it, will say, oh, no. Well, look, I've been approached by people and I've reconsidered and I'm going to do it because they want me to. So, yes. Great. Funny.
Okay, just to finish with, we need to wrap it up there, but just a couple of comments here because there was one very good question. Why says racist minister, which I think is referring to Paul Goldsmith, so feels it's racist. I was interested to note that, and he showed it in Parliament, Paul Goldsmith, that he actually showed the letter with all the Māori in it for New Zealand invitees, but he just changed it for the Australian, so whether that's a defence, maybe. Rosie says, David Seymour wants people with a disability euthanised. I have a disability, but I'm not a burden to the health system in New Zealand. Joanne says, total trivia from mainstream media regarding the invitation to an Australian politician. Now, this is the key one. Can't find anywhere on the Ministry of Health to submit on the euthanasia review. What was the, let me just show that image.
The web address
again.
is too long for me to quote here, but for Nancy and others, why don't we put a link in afterwards as part of the comments? Or if they're still having trouble, what's our best generic email to use for Family First, Bob?
admin@familyfirst.org.nz. But Nancy Margaret, just hold in there because we are, as we speak, just preparing a little guidance sheet so that you can respond in the best way, because you actually go online and you have to answer questions. And I think, Simon, you've had a look, and would it be fair to say that some of them are a little bit misleading and people could go down the wrong path? I always remember the example of when they were polling about euthanasia and they would ring up people and they would say, do you think people should die in dignity? Well, you and me as ardent opponents of euthanasia would answer, yes, we do think they should die in dignity, and hospice, palliative care do a wonderful, fantastic, supportive job, and families are part of that process. But of course, that's how they manipulate. So you've actually had a look at the questions, haven't you? Are you a little bit concerned that there's some leading questions in there?
Absolutely. You've taken the word right out of my mouth. It's some leading questions, not all of them, but they're quite leading questions, quite presumptive. the basic principle is that the law is operating well. There are no problems. It's really just about how you would try to improve it. And by improve, they mean expand. And so that sort of theme angle is present in most of the questions. So that's why, again, we're wanting to put a bit of guidance, not to tell you what to say, that's your own choice, but it's more just to give you a bit of a hint of how you can actually get what you think across, because, the officials are trying to guide you down a particular path by the way they've written the questions.
Okay, we're out of time because I think you're responsible for dinner tonight, and I probably need to get home as
But
well.
to grab we've instituted a grab your own tonight, so the kids are out. It's just Rachel and I, so and I'm on the show.
Fast food night at the O'Connor House on a Thursday night. There we go. What a rip. Okay, we will be back next Thursday night at 5 o'clock to discuss all the things political in New Zealand. There's not a shortage. We're having to cull what we discuss. In fact, we left off a key topic that we will come back to next week to discuss. So we will be back next Thursday at 5. Don't forget Straight Talk on Monday at 8 o'clock. And in fact, just on the euthanasia issue, I might just give you a little promotion here, Simon. Simon did a great interview with Dr. John Kleinsman from the Nathaniel Centre in Wellington, and it's on the euthanasia issue, the ethics, and it's well worth watching. That's on our website, familyfirst.nz. Anyway, we are out of time. Thank you, Simon. Great job.
Good to join you guys.
See you next week.